Hi, and welcome to another episode of REDtalks.live. I don't remember what number this is. I think we're like 32. Could be wrong. This episode is about visibility of statistics and data. So there's kind of two school of thoughts depending on where organizations are in their evolution from traditional operations, siloed teams managing groups of technologies and devices versus agile moving into DevOps and continuous deployment and integration and systems thinking. Now, in the traditional method, obviously you're wanting analytics tooling being provided from your vendor. So, giving you device management technologies, dashboards, etc. However, for those organizations that have evolved into more modern practices, they actually have their own dashboarding systems that networking vendors and various infrastructure vendors are expected to integrate into. A few examples, like if you look at on GitHub and just take a look at the stacks that Etsy, Uber, Lyft, all those kind of guys, Facebook, what they put out, they're using open source technologies. They're using things like GraphIDB. They're using StatsD from Etsy, which is awesome. I've been working with that a lot lately. And they present all of this in Grafana dashboards, like another thing I can just download and run, and I've got these beautiful dashboards showing me that everything's going on. But the cool bit about this movement to this centralized analytics, and I've been challenged by a few customers lately where I've gone to meet them and they've said, I don't want to see how your product has this GUI on it. I want to see how you can support and enhance my dashboard. So it's your job now, Mr. Vendor, to get your stuff into my dashboard. And it's kind of cool. I actually really like this. What? Yet another GUI. I mean, they're saying enough of that. We can't hire enough people to manage all of the vendor tools. So this episode's all about some work I've been doing. I created a prototype. In fact, in this first prototype, StatsD is one of the destinations that I can publish stats to. And hopefully this will be useful to organizations. I've had a few people ask me, can I publish data to like Kafka message buses, things like that. That's coming in version 0.2, so 0.1's got StatsD. So anyway, let's just go for a quick demo. In this episode, I'll show you how it works, the way I've been looking at things, and then I'll do a more detailed episode later in the week, maybe early next week, where I'll go through how it all works and how everything links together, how to do an install, how to set up, detail stuff, like I did with the GitHub webhook server episodes. So here, let's jump straight through to the quick demo of what is it that I've been working on with statistics. Okay, so now we've switched screens. What I'm going to do is show you how you can make delightful dashboards like this in an awesome solution called Grafana. This is what a lot of people use to get visibility on their applications and services. So why not bring some of the wonderful information out of the F5 Big IP into this world as well? So how do we get these dashboards from the F5 Big IP? So the bit of software I've released that kind of bridges some of that gap is called Big Stats. So Big Stats is an iControl LX worker. iControl LX language extension, that's the framework on the F5 Big IP upon which we develop our iControl REST API. But with iControl LX, I'm able to develop my own extensions on our API. And one of these extensions that I've just released, version 0.1, allows me to provide a destination for statistics. So traditionally, what you do with any kind of infrastructure device is you have to have a monitoring system that polls that device and goes and gets the data from it. But a lot of the way a lot of people are collecting information and developing dashboards now, they put the onus on the system to present data to that service. So we might have something like Etsy's awesome StatsD that we have to push data to, or maybe we're using an Apache Kafka message bus that we have to push statistics to a Kafka topic. The responsibility is now on us to provide that information instead of sitting there and everyone has to come to us to get it. So what I did is I wrote one of these iControl LX extensions called Big Stats. You install that. We'll skip past all the installation stuff. And then once it's installed, it presents a new REST endpoint on the Big IP, and you post to that endpoint to tell it where the stats should be shared to. So in this example, we've got a HTTP endpoint we're going to post to. So it's a HTTP server. We're going to post to the stats URI, the endpoint that's on this IP address and this port, and it's going to do it every 10 seconds. The demonstration I'm going to show today, I've actually integrated a statsd client. So I'm using this awesome node module here that someone else has already written. And I'm going to, there's no URI, you'll notice, because it's talking to statsd. It's a UDP stream, and I'm just pushing data to a statsd daemon running in a Docker container, which also happens to be running the Graphite time series database. Time series databases are excellent for real-time statistical information. So what I'm telling it is every 10 seconds, I want you to push all the stats that you're collecting to that location. Now, because this is in Big Stats settings, and I post to it, I can easily just override the interval. I can change the destination. This is the configuration setup, and these are the options you can specify. If you do need to debug to see maybe why your stats aren't arriving where you thought they should go, I recommend you turn that off once you've done your troubleshooting, because it puts quite a lot of data. There's a lot of debug information, which helps in fixing things quickly, but it also means a lot of data is going to appear. So let's go through how we run this. So you install the RPM onto your big IP. In the HTTP example, I can show you this is the kind of data that is getting posted. So what the worker does, you don't have to tell it what configuration to monitor. It automatically goes through the configuration of the big IP. It looks for all of the VIPs, all the applications that have been configured by the AS3 worker, so the application services declarative interface. It goes and looks through all the things that have been deployed by that, and it grabs all of the configurations. So current connections, maximum connections, bits in, out, etc., etc. So in this example, I had created 3 applications on my big IP. Each one of them had only one VIP. It supports multiple. And then this is the stats it found for each. So it posts that. I've pretty printed it. It actually just puts it all in one single line. And that's the HTTP example, or HTTPS if you were to change that. In the proto section, you'll see you can put HTTP, HTTPS, or statsd. In the statsd example, it presents things a little bit differently. I won't go into all of the details in this first intro video, but yeah, you'll see here, we'll just go into the big IP. What it's gone and done is it's just looked up. It's gone through all of the tenants on this box. So we've got VIP. There's 2 VIPs in this tenant, sample 1, and then there's 1 VIP in this tenant, app 2 in sample 2. So that's what it's actually found when it's built out this data. So it will find anything new that's added after this. So statsd in this configuration that I've provided, in fact, let's go and have a look. So here we are. I'm going to take a look at the settings. These were the last settings I gave it. Right now it's every 12 seconds it's posting data. I've got debug on false. When you post, it responds back with what that last state was, which is excellent. So let's look at this. It's talking to statsd. This is statsd in my environment. I have run up a Docker container. And this Docker container is actually produced by the awesome people who make Graphite. And it's Graphite, the time series database, and statsd is the daemon that you push the data to. Statsd is then putting that data into the Graphite database. Okay, and all I've done is Docker run. I literally have just done a Docker run command. It's gone and downloaded the container, it's spun it up, and now it's running. So let's go and have a look, because I've had this running for a couple of seconds before I start the video. So this is that container. I've gone directly to it. And now if I go into metrics, stats, gauges, here are the apps. I did not have to come to this container and tell it about those apps. The big stats worker itself tells Graphite, these are my namespaces, so create entries. So this was an empty container. I've just spun it up, and magically it now is collecting this data, and you'll see it mirrors that pattern that the HTTP output was doing. So I've taken what I was sending to HTTP, I've turned that into the format that StatsD receives the information, and then I sent it to StatsD. So here we are, current connections in this environment. So this is over the whole day since midnight. Let's shrink that to something a little more. Let's just show the last 6 hours. So here's a test I ran before. We had up to 4 concurrent connections. Right now, at any one time, we've had up to 2 connections. That's great. Maximum at any time. Oh, we got up to 6 earlier. Out of control. This is the hardest bit when you do anything with statistics. It's generating traffic to make the graphs look good. So I've got, this is my environment. We'll go into my AWS. The entire environment. The only thing I've actually done that's different is I installed my iControl LX worker, which is an RPM, onto this big IP here. All of these other things, well, I've got my Graphite time series database is just a Docker run command I ran on this Docker host. The Grafana dashboard, that was just another Docker run command I ran. And literally just like 2 settings I put in that. And then all this, the majority of the work to get this demo was actually building out these 5 micro instance clients, and then these web servers on the back end to respond to those requests. And to give you an example of how simple this environment is, this is the entire client that is generating traffic. So it's grabbing a 1 meg file, sleeping for a random amount of time, a 2 meg file, and a 3 meg file, just with random sleep intervals. So I'm running that across a bunch of devices. I've kicked this off on 1, 2, 3 already. Let's just run it on 2 more. And it's just that simple script. So all I did, I've done my Docker pull. So this is StatsD. It should increment now and actually show us that a couple more clients have come in. Let's shorten the time series. Otherwise, it's going to take a long time before we see it. And hasn't got there just yet. Let's make it even shorter. Let's go minutes. And now we've got 1 minute. So we've got a little bit more data. Let's just make that 10 for now. Okay, so we're going to see this keep posting data. Now, while this is adding data, let me show you how I got Grafana to talk to it. So this is the same data coming through in Grafana. Grafana's a bit prettier to work with, and it holds data for longer. It collects it. So I'm just using Graphite as a kind of way to parse data through to here. Let's just do the last 3 hours. We've got a bit more detail. In fact, let's go down to 30 minutes. Bit more interesting. So this is my little client running in the background, just opening connections, closing them, generating information. To get this set up, let's create a new dashboard. I'll show you how simple this was. First, when I ran up Grafana, I went onto the GUI. So see that port 3000? That was the port I used when I did my Docker run. You'll see port 3000 redirects into the container on port 3000. So I just hit that in my browser. I went in and I created a data source. This is my data source. See in the list here? So Grafana already knows how to talk to these data sources. They're already built in. You don't have to add any plugins or anything. So I just picked Graphite from the list. There's my IP address, 79. It's the same Docker host. And now it's talking to that container. In my configuration, they actually have a proxy routing traffic into the container. So I told it that I have a proxy that I'm connecting through. That was just it's just an Nginx proxy inside the container that's just doing a redirect. And that was done. And I gave it the username and password credentials for that Graphite install. I'm lazy. I'm just using the root login. You probably wouldn't do that in the real world. So once you set that data source up, it's now talking directly to that Graphite DB, which my StatsD worker is just filling with lovely data. So I'm going to go in and create a dashboard now. This is how simple it is to create a dashboard. I'm going to go edit, and down here, see these metrics. We'll see data source. It's only got 1 data source, so the default, it's actually talking straight to Graphite. Now, when I click this, it's looking up directly into that Graphite DB. So look at this, we've got gauges, metrics. It's doing calls straight to Graphite DB right now at 1A, and then VIP, and then current connections. The moment I click it, I start seeing the data pull through. So this is how people get these really fancy dashboards that are all magical for operational staff to view. Oh, and I won't go into this in here, but Grafana is awesome because then I can now say of that data, I want you to do things. I want you to convert it to percentages. I want you to average stuff out. I want you to like times this by this and give me another line for something. It's awesome. Just take a look at it. So I'm going to overlay this with a second metric. So instead of just doing current connections on the client side to the VIP, I'm also going to tell it that I want to look at the maximum. So we've got current connections, maximum as well. So now I've got those two overlaid. Fabulous. Maximum of 6, and then my current is now up to 5. See how it's climbed up a little bit there? So let's save this dashboard and big stats demo, and we'll save it in the general folder. And here we are, big stats demo is up and running. I can now do cool things like say, you know what, just give me the last 15 minutes, the time we've been talking on here. See, I spun up those 2 new clients. Before we were just doing a maximum of 3. I put 2 more on. Now we're getting up to 5 at a time for certain intervals between sleeps. So yeah, that's how you get, I mean, it does not take a lot of work at all to get information, to get the big IPs populating this and telling me all about what's going on. And again, this is per app. So in this example, I've only got 1 application set up because I have to generate traffic somehow. The rest of them, I'll show you. I mean, there's no pools in these ones and there's no traffic generators. So if I go in and click any of these, it's just a flat line along the bottom. So yeah, if anyone wants to donate some huge amounts of traffic generating equipment to me, I would love to make more interesting dashboards. So that's the short demo of Big Stats. It's Big IP. I installed an iControl LX worker. That iControl LX worker is just called Big Stats. In here, there's the full installation instructions. That is literally it. It's like 3 commands. And it's up and running. And then you post to Big Stats. You tell it whether you want to do HTTP as your destination, because maybe you've got a HTTP or HTTPS service, or you tell it it's statsd is the end. You'll notice there's no URI when I'm using statsd because it's just a raw UDP stream straight to that address. And then all I've done after that is 2 Docker run commands. I did that Docker run and then that Docker run, and everything was up and running then, collecting information. The only final step for me to do was to click those buttons at the bottom. I'll show you them again. Edit. And tell it, I want this stat, and overlay them up there. Magic, right? Stats for the win. Okay, that's it for this quick demonstration. Like I did with the GitHub Enterprise webhook, that's how I set up this big IP, was using the webhook infrastructure as code integration. So like I did with that series, I did a quick demo, then I went really deep into the details, and then I went into troubleshooting and debug. I'm going to do that the same for this stats one. So this was the quick demo, and then come back for the next episode if you want to really get into the details of the full setup end-to-end of the environment and every single little step. Thanks for listening. Enjoy awesome stats.